Hello, everybody. It's James here. Storytime with Dutch Mantell, episode 19. I think it's 19. Yeah, it's 19. So I actually have to do a bit of an explanation. I solicited a load of questions, and the thing is that we ended up having so much news to talk about this week that we're doing news this week again. We were going to do questions when I was over in Turkey, but the internet was terrible, so we thought we'd spare you a second week of terrible internet. But for now, before we go any further, we'll do the plugs. So first off, mine, Owen, Hart, King of Pranks. You can get that on Amazon. Same with The Rock People's Champion. Very, very fine books indeed. And Dutch, I'm going to put the camera on you while I show these next books. It's The World According to Dutch. A great book.
Great book.
And Tales from a Dirt Road, also by Dutch Mantell. Amazon. And you've also got some other merchandise that you deal in.
Yes. Well, I call my my little business here the University of Dutch. And a lot of people have written me email at Dirty Dutch Mantell with 2 L's at gmail.com. And most of them have expressed that how much they enjoy the show, how much that we seem to make a good team. Mm-hmm. That you're a good co-host. They always compliment you. Mm-hmm. And they're saying that they didn't know that a lot of stuff in the earlier days of wrestling, they don't know how the machinery worked. And tell you the truth, I don't know how the machinery worked either, but it did. So I call it the University of Dutch, and people said, well, we're learning more and more and more about it, which resulted in my University of Dutch diploma. Mm-hmm. And you can be, and this is James, that's yours.
Thank you.
You just don't have it yet.
No, I've got a space either on the wall or on the shelf where it's going to take pride of place.
And all I have to do is put the seal right there and sign it, and it's signed by Dutch Mantell, who is the dean of the University of Dutch, and Zeb Colter, who's like the commissioner of the school, or he's the president of the school, because they've just shaken up their staff. But and I've been getting I've been getting quite a few requests, and I'm trying to get them out as fast as I can. My printer went down this morning, so now I'm arguing with Instaprint or Insta Ink, HP Insta Ink. And I called them up. This is what I hate about when you call them up, and then you get the recording and punch this number and then punch this number. I swear to God, national security isn't that hard. I mean, if you can walk right across the Mexican-American border, but you got to keep pushing numbers, and the people who answer the phone are not Americans. You know, they just sent that out to the Philippines, and they have, sometimes you can't even understand them. They speak English, but they speak it in such an accent you don't even understand it. So anyway, that pisses me off. But listen, if you want one, and James is the first one I thought of, you can get this, you can hang it on your wall. Somebody's talking about wrestling, you say, where did you get your degree in wrestling? Well, I don't have one. Well, I do, by God, a PhD in the wrestling arts. It's $40, and I'll ship it right back to you. If you're not in Canada, Canada is a little higher. So I just want to, I want to, and England is ridiculous. England is about, or the UK is like $25. And I'm thinking, my God, why is it so high there?
I had a word with the provost of the University of Dutch, and he's sending me a freebie, so that's a good one. But how can one achieve a doctorate in wrestling? Or how do they contact you to get one?
At Dirty Dutch Mantell at gmail.com. It's all and you go to PayPal, Dirty Dutch Mantell at Gmail, and send me $40.
There you go.
And tell me what you want.
And the books.
And what name, and the books the same way. The books are a little higher, but you get about 700 pages of material. And these are old stories that are never going away. And unless they were written down and recorded, they would be lost. And you see how much information you could have lost if I hadn't written all that stuff down. Mm-hmm. So let's get into this. I'm ready to talk.
That's what we're here for. Well, that's what you're here for. I'm here
So,
merely to throw questions at you. But yes, Dutch.
are you tired?
I'm not too bad. I've been up since 6 a.m. local time. I've been working since 6 a.m. local time. As we record this, we're just before 6 p.m. I'm not too bad, but I mean, I just flying, man. I hate flying. I've said this to you before, like how all the wrestlers dealt with flying on, 4 or 5 times a week. I
Oh
mean, your
my
body
God.
must acclimatize to it, surely, because
Don't
ugh.
don't get me going on that. Oh. Well, there's a question toward the end today, right? You're going to ask me?
Yes, there is. For now, though, I'll tell you what, we'll save that till the end. But for now, though, we're going to go through some news. As we record this is a Thursday, 22nd, and yesterday was AEW Grand Slam. At the time of recording, I've not seen it, you've not seen it, but you've heard it was a hell of a show.
I heard it was a hell of a show, and they had some surprises on it. And a lot of the endings of the matches that we call finishes surprised me too. But that's why I think people watch wrestling, to be surprised. If you go to a football game or a soccer game and you know who's going to win and the team wins, you say, I knew that was going to happen. Same way in wrestling. The guy that you thought was going to win won. You say, I knew that. But when the guy you don't think was going to win wins, well, that's different. Let me tell you what I think sets what is it? AIW?
AEW.
AEW. I said AI. I think what sets them apart from most other promotions is they have finishes. They don't have a lot of run-ins. They do, but not like some companies that I worked for in the past. It was just a constant interference or something behind the referee's back. Well, I've always said if you're going to do this in front of the referee, it's on camera. What happened to the instant replay? And all you had to do was go back and look at it. And that was the same, not ideology, but it was the same scheme that I used in Puerto Rico. I used finishes. I bet the whole time, the 3 years I was in Puerto Rico, I bet I didn't have more than 10 DQs in 3 years. Because I thought that if a fan buys a ticket and sits down, me, as the booker, I'm obligated to them to give them a decent finish. And I didn't do that many DQs either. How I kept heat on the heels. I demonstrated that the good guys could beat the bad guys, but the belts were really not on the line that much. So when the title match come, now I work my heat. And I think that may have helped AEW out because you have with any new promotion, TNA was the same thing. The people sit back and said, that was nothing. This is that. You're always going to have your complainers. I don't care what it is. WWE has more than anybody, but yet look at the business they do. My advice to anybody watching wrestling is sit back and enjoy it for what it is. And if it gets to the point to where you don't enjoy it anymore, guess what? Watch something else or turn the TV off and go to bed. That's simple advice. And if you follow that, nobody wants to be around somebody constantly bitching about the show. Don't watch it. Simple as that.
I've got a question for you then. So you said in 3 years in Puerto Rico, maybe 10 DQs. Now, do you have to, when somebody else is coming in or maybe some big stars making some sort of appearance, do you have to sort of let these people know that the culture here is no DQs, you take your loss like a man, you take your wins like a man, that kind of thing, or what?
Hey, if they come in, I was paying them. This is what I wanted them to do. Now, it's according to how big they were. Like I brought Kane in and I DQ'd him. Of course, he destroyed everybody, but everybody thought he was going to do that anyway. So he did what the fans expected him to do. But I brought in some more guys. If I'm paying them, I want them to do what's going to help me. And a lot of times I would I would, I forgot how I did this, but I would say, oh, I know what I do. I say, let him hook you with a small package. 1, 2, 3, hop up, give me like a 10-second fade out. Okay. Then you get up and you beat the living crap out of him and leave him laying. Oh, okay, okay, okay. But they didn't know that when the tape played back, I stopped the tape at the end of the 10 seconds and they never saw the rest of it. So, and that's how sometimes you have to, they don't know what I'm going to do with that tape anyway. But they did what I said, and it was my obligation to get my company going. I mean, it wasn't my company, but I was booking the company, and hopefully, and it was making big money. When I got it hot, we would go to stadiums that seated 15, 16,000 and turn people away. I bet now in Puerto Rico, you couldn't give 15,000 tickets away. You couldn't do it.
I saw some footage from Puerto Rico that I looked at and I thought, this must be from like the late 80s or something like that. No, it was brand new. Yeah. I mean, they filmed, I mean, I've probably said this before, but they must film those shows on a potato. It's like they look terrible. Or they did at least a few years ago when I last saw them. And, you know, you could film it on your phone and have better quality. And I don't know why they just don't update stuff.
Well, they had a library there. And I kept asking them, I said, when you guys you're going to sell this to Vince or WWE? Maybe it was WWF then. And they said, well, we're talking. So, and IWA had kind of died on its own because when I left down there, the territory still did well for about 6 months, but it was running on the steam that had been built up prior. And then when they had to start doing everything new, then it started dropping. And finally, the guy who owned it, whose name was Victor Quinones, when he died, it just went all to hell. I mean, because he had put a lot of money in it, but when he passed away, it kind of just, it lost its steam. And somehow in their tape library, I don't think they owned it. Some other guy from the States bought it, and how he bought it, I don't know. And that's why you don't see a lot of old Puerto Rico stuff on the network of WWE, because they paid well for that stuff. So, but you don't even see a lot of it on even YouTube now.
No. This is something that I can't remember if we were going to save for a future episode or I saw the question and liked it. But when you were working in PR many years ago, I think it was Capital Sports in Puerto Rico, and Gorilla Monsoon was one of the owners, wasn't he?
Yes.
What was Gorilla Monsoon's involvement in it other than just being a stakeholder?
No, he was just an investor, as far as I know. He was an investor, and which leads me to another subject. Abdullah the Butcher was an investor too. Mm-hmm. And I think, and this hasn't been validated, like that word, validated, but Bruiser Brody was allegedly trying to buy in too, which fueled the problem between him and that Invader One, the guy who stabbed him. Because he said if he bought in, and the Invader was the booker at that time, this is 1988, that he wasn't going to let him be the booker because he didn't like the way he did it. So I don't know how much that had to do with the whole thing, but it had to. I think it rubbed the Invader the wrong way, and he's about half gone anyway. And I'm not, and this is nothing in defense of the Invader, but his 3-year-old little girl had died about 6 months earlier, and he was still, I'm sure, mourning her death. I mean, it's not an excuse, but I'm sure he wasn't in his right mind either. And I've written about it in my book about the night it happened because I was there. and just a little bit off topic, but, and I may have said this last week, Ric Flair said for years that he was there in Puerto Rico when it happened, but he wasn't. It was easily, you could fact check that easily, but he wasn't there. And why he said it, I don't know. But he wasn't there, and it was just a crazy time for everybody. And we, the next day's show, we all boycotted. Nobody went to the show the next day. They had like a $30,000 house, I think, which in Puerto Rico was a hell of a house because tickets weren't expensive. So if they would fill up a 6,000 or 7,000 seat arena on the other side of the island, it was a hell of a house, and we didn't go because I didn't feel like going, and nobody else felt like going. So we just saw they all went to the show, but the wrestlers didn't show up. The American wrestlers didn't, so they didn't have a show. They had to cancel it.
I know I keep saying this. We will do a full special on the Bruiser Brody thing. I have so many follow-up questions, but I am going to save them for now, and we will do one giant bumper episode on that in the very near future as well. I'm going to order the books. I've already got your book, so I can find your story. I'm going to watch The Dark Side of the Ring, and I will have probably to your your great amusement, the longest script you've ever seen. Before we talk about Bruiser Brody anymore, and we'll save it for another day. A couple of things about AEW Grand Slam since we're doing the news this week. I'll read out the results, and you tell me if any of them stand out to you that you want to talk about. Chris Jericho defeats Claudio Castagnoli for the Ring of Honor World Title. The Acclaim defeats Swerve.
That surprised me.
Yeah, did you actually work with Chris Jericho at all in your second WWE run?
Oh yeah, Jack worked with him several times, and Jericho, he's really, really good. I told him one night, I said, brother, you're always in the right spot at the right time, even if your opponent isn't. Because I think Jack slammed him, and he looked up and he moved himself over. So. You got to really, a good worker does his work and his opponents too. That's what a good worker is. And he's one of the best. Now, he won the Ring of Honor championship. That's why I think he's going to Ring of Honor when they get it started. Since he's the champion, he'd have to go. And I think he'll have a little more pull there than he probably has in AEW right now. And then again, he may not even want any pull. See, if I was still wrestling and somebody said, you want a book? I'd say not no, but hell no. I just want to do my work, and everybody else, you do yours and let somebody else figure it out. Because I've told you my theory, right? When the territory's up and doing good, it's all of the talents. They're just great. But when it's bad, no, that booker's stupid. He's a piece of crap. He don't know what the hell he's doing. But he gets all the blame if it's down, but the talent gets all the credit when it's up.
What is Chris Jericho's relationship to Jake Hager? Because they see, Jericho brought Jake Hager in straight away as soon as he could, it seemed.
Well, I think Chris just likes him, and he liked him in WWE. He liked him there, and he enjoyed working with him, and he's a big guy. And see, Jake doesn't really depend on AEW to make his living. He's doing that, the MMA stuff. Mm-hmm. So, and some of the payoffs he's got for the work he did, I mean, are not astronomical, but they're very, very good. And, you talk about the payoffs you get on some of these MMA events. Well, Jake Paul has already shown the fighters, now these are over-the-hill fighters, what a payoff is. Mm-hmm. He got Mayfield out. Mayfield don't come out for no $100,000. Mayfield got him in it, and he's still complaining he's not getting paid. But the other fighters that he brought out made them big, big paydays. And that surprises me about, the Logan boys, Paul and Jake. They build their fights as exhibitions, but yet people buy them as shoots. Mm-hmm. See what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, they're calling it an exhibition, which is saying, no, we're not out here to kill each other. But yet, people, when they start watching it, well, that was That was a good one. That was a good one. That was a good one. And they convinced them that, yeah, now one of them's mad. Hey, it's the same. It's the same thing in wrestling. You can take away, and I've said this 1,000 times, if you can take away that little maybe this, maybe that, if you get them in that groove, you got them.
I think with the exhibition thing, it also comes down to Jake Paul and Logan Paul outweighing their opponents generally by £30, and that's why the commissions won't sanction it as a legitimate fight. So therefore, they have to bill it as an exhibition. And also,
they couldn't bill it as a legitimate fight anyway.
Well,
because it's not. You know where the blade in wrestling come from?
No, I don't.
An old timer told me this. It come from boxing. No, when a boxer gets hit over the eye and it swells, how they make that swelling go away real quick? They cut it and it drains. So some wrestling guy saw it. He said, "Hey, we can do that. We'll just do it the other way." And that's where it came from. And I didn't know that either.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. I'm wondering what. Right. Okay. So this is a completely different question. We're entirely off topic here. It doesn't matter. I heard
but that's what it is. We're like two wrestlers or three or four going down the road, and we're just bullshitting back and forth because that's the way the conversations went. And that's when I used to drive and I would listen to the old timers tell these stories. Hell, I didn't contribute anything, but I listened, and some great stories they told. And if I can remember some of them, I'll tell some of them one day.
With the history of wrestling, and you're far more knowledgeable than I'll ever be, with somewhere around the turn of the century, it was believed that boxing and pro wrestling were about as fixed as each other were. And I don't know the story of why boxing went at least more legitimate and wrestling went the other way.
Well, gambling had a lot to do with boxing. Because a boxer, the mafia, they told the boxer, "Hey, you need to tank in about the fifth." Well, if he don't tank in the fifth, he's in trouble. Like Pulp Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And he won the fight and hopped out, grabbed the cab, took off. It was going to kill him. But do you know, this is another thing I heard from an old timer. Wrestling first became a work when? Did I ever tell you this?
No, you didn't.
In the gladiator days. Because of gambling in the Roman days. And sometimes they would put some newcomer out there that was horrible. And when the fans did this because he was really bad, well, if the emperor did that too, they'd kill him. That's what I heard. But the gamblers got a hold of that too, and no telling how much money they made them before the people caught up. Mm-hmm. You see what things used to be the way they are, and today they haven't even changed.
You used to be able to gamble on pro wrestling up until like the 30s, I think. And now you can gamble on pro wrestling again of the last 10 years.
DraftKings.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can bet on. How do you bet on that?
In this country, Sky Bets, I think, is the only one that really takes pro wrestling bets. And what they do is they give you a £25 limit. So about $30 in this day and age. And that's it. You can't stake anymore.
Well, okay, if you bet $25, let's say, and your guy wins, what do you win? $5? $25?
It depends. I won a couple of £100 just on a bet on the Royal Rumble, and one of the bets was name one of the last four in the Royal Rumble, and I had a scrolled through, and 33-1 was Dolph Ziggler, so I put a fiver on that, and he came in 33-1 and made me nearly £200.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I've never bet on wrestling ever. So read me another question here.
Okay, then. The acclaimed.
Hey, you mind putting in that next little convenience store? I gotta get a cup of coffee. We're in the car, remember?
No, of course. Hang on one second.
Yeah. And I gotta use the bathroom too. So.
Oh dear.
And that's what it is. That's what starts arguments in cars. guys will argue about anything in those cars, and it'll go on and on and on. Sometimes it's the work, sometimes the guy's ribbing another, and sometimes those ribs turn serious, and that's when you have the fights on the side of the road, which I kind of liked, but I didn't want to be in them, but I like to watch them.
we had private transfer to the airports where we were staying in Turkey, and both on the way there to the hotel, on the way back to the airport, they stopped off halfway at this little roadside shop kind of thing. And you went in, and I don't know if you've ever been to, I'm sure you must have done, like some Middle Eastern country. My God, they like to just hang on to you like a limpet when you're just trying to have a little browse around the shop, and they're sniffing around you. And as soon as you look at something, they grab it right in front of your face. Go, oh, this is very good. I won't do the impression. This is very good. €4 or Turkish lira or whatever. And this woman would not leave us alone. Me and Mrs. WSI, we'll call her. And and in the end, she wasn't getting the message. So I just turned around and just went, fuck off. And she actually learned that. And she went, okay. Then she walked off. I was like, man, fuck off. It's just great in any language.
Now, didn't you feel bad doing that?
No, she hassled us for too long. I got past the feeling bad stage. You
rude British. An American would have done that. American would have added about 10 more seconds of that. Goddamn motherfucker. Then they say, okay. All right, your next question.
Oh, we're still on the first bit of the first question. We won't bother with the other ones. John Moxley defeats Bryan Danielson for the AEW World Championship.
That kind of surprised me too.
Yeah, I would have thought that Bryan Danielson was the reason why AEW's ratings went so high up the last couple of weeks. And it's like, man, everyone loves him. Everybody knows his name. He's probably the most famous person apart from Punk. Why not him? And Jericho.
Well, I think he made the right decision, because I don't think he could have made a bad decision in that anyway. But they did a straight up finish. 1, 2, 3, boom. They got up, hugged each other, shook their hands. People liked it. Off they went, which is a lot to be said for that, because, a lot of people see people getting up, getting beat, and beating the shit out of the other guy. They see that all the time. But a guy getting up, shaking somebody's hand, and I've seen it 100 times, but it's not used very much, especially not in high-profile matches like they had.
Would you, as a booker, just look at that and think, man, that really puts an end to that potential story? I mean, wouldn't one jump and beat the other, or no?
No, what he's got 2 hours or 3 hours of TV a week, right? Mm-hmm. Now he's getting Ring of Honor. All you do is restart it with another angle to it, with another slant to it. And they can always revert back. Oh, you won the last one. But by God, now things have changed. And because fans do not forget. They don't ever forget. One time in WWE, they told me to take the bullwhip to the ring with me. I said, are you sure? They said, yeah, take it to the ring with you. Vince said that. So I go out there with that bullwhip, and I didn't open it up to the very end, because I put it in a paper bag and left it in the corner, and I pulled it out, and then I cracked it. And the people, whoa, they straightened up. And it was for Rusev, Miro. And I told him, you get in my face one more time, I said, I'm going to beat you like a 1,200-pound bull. I'm going to break you down like a 410 shotgun or something like that. Brother, I got back to the dressing room. Corporate was already calling. Tell Zeb he can't use it. Whose idea was that? Blah, 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 blah. And then they told me that night, okay, you can't use the bullwhip anymore. And the reason they couldn't crop it out, it was a live show. So they left it in, but corporate went crazy because they was afraid of getting caught up in the racism deal. And it was 12 Years a Slave coming out and some other movies coming out. So the next week I went out on the show. I never forget this. And I looked at Vince. I said, hey, Vince, what do I say about the bullwhip? He says, Just pretend it never happened. So I walked out there and nothing else was said about it. But corporate went crazy. I mean, those phones were, all the agents were coming to me. Why'd you take that whip out there? I said, well, why don't you ask Vince? He's the one who told me to do it. I mean, I just work here, man. Don't y'all get the same directions I do or what? So, but anyway, it was like, there's probably a 2-day, windfall over it, or, a furor over me taking the bullwhip out there. But they told me to do it, so I did it.
How long did it take you to perfect the whip action?
It took me a while, because if you don't know about a whip, you beat the shit out of yourself more than you don't do anything else. Finally, a guy showed me, he said, listen, when you throw it out, don't pull it back like it's a fishing rod. You go back and said you let it out, then you have it crack, which kills its own power. Then it drops. Then you can go at it again. Took me about a month to learn that. And I was beating the crap out of myself. Because can you imagine getting hit with a bullwhip? I mean, it hurts. It really does. So, but some guys are so good at it. I got a ring in Memphis one night. Phil Hickerson was my opponent, and he had a baseball cap on, and I'm playing. I threw it at him, and it hit the tip of his cap, pow, and knocked the cap off. People went, and he went like this, whoa, because he heard it pop right there. And then when it went off, the fan said, damn, that's pretty damn accurate. So, but bullwhip was always good if you had a feud to settle with the guy, or he'd punched too hard, or he was a little too stiff. And it didn't take much of a pop from a whip to straighten him out. And they would jump. And then the best way to throw a whip, you throw it behind them, it pops, it kills the power, and it moves so fast. What makes it pop is it's traveling faster than the speed of sound. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then it's sonic, pow. Then you pull it back. I didn't know that. I had to whip 10 years. Somebody told me. And I said, I didn't know that. And they said, oh, yeah.
There you go. It is I'm just reading it there. When a section of the whip moves faster than the speed of sound, creating a small sonic boom. There you go.
That's right. There it is. And then I bet a lot of people listening to this, the same way as a belt, you pop a belt or you pop anything, a rope. But when it pops, that means at that particular instant in time, it's traveling faster than sound. Mm-hmm. You see how scientific we are, and how many interesting things people learn and just listening to us.
I saw that on Mythbusters. That's how I know that fact. If you ever watched Mythbusters back in the day.
Oh, what Busters?
Mythbusters. Did you never see it? I loved it. It was on Discovery.
I probably seen it at a time too. Mythbusters, yes. Yeah. Good show.
Yeah, we will move on then. Forget about AEW. We're going to go on to Ricky Steamboat returning to the ring this November at the age of 69. Now, I've got a load written about it. Essentially, he retired in 1994 due to back problems in a match with Steve Austin, Clash of the Champions 28. He came back for a few matches in 2009. He had one in 2010. And then he's retired again now. He's coming back at 69. Now, the reason why this is more newsworthy than it otherwise would be is that his name came up during Ric Flair's last match as his ideal last opponent. Ricky Steamboat just ruled himself out completely. And now he's getting back into the ring, so goodness knows why. But Ricky getting back into the ring at 69. Mm-hmm.
Somebody threw some cash at him. To try it, and if he's in good enough shape, and I think Steamboat has stayed in pretty decent shape. But look, he's 69. Give it up. And Flair, what did I say about him a month ago or whenever he had his last match?
I'll give you the quote, shall I? He then added on his podcast, he says some preamble about Ricky Steamboat being in great shape, probably still better than half the wrestlers, that kind of thing. And then he added, Steamboat coming back makes me want to come back again. I went back up to Lincoln and started training again. What else is there to do?
Lincoln, where'd he go to? Lincoln, North Carolina or what?
Nebraska,
Lincoln.
God knows.
I don't know. I don't know what Lincoln means. But he started training. Okay.
Abe Lincoln got some tips.
Yeah, well, he did wrestle a bear, by the way. But I said about Flair a long time ago. I said, "Oh, this is his last match," and they sold out in Nashville, Tennessee, the Civic Center downtown. But I says, "Is that his last match?" I bet it's not. To somebody else throws him some money, and he'll go and he'll try it again. I do think that he wants to die in the ring. I think he'd probably be happy if he just went ahead and died in the ring. But anytime somebody hits an age, and that's what state athletic commissions used to actually be good at, is they didn't let a guy wrestle if he was over 45. They wouldn't let him wrestle, which is the only good thing they ever did, to tell you the truth. But but allowing Flair to get in the ring at 72, which is not only harmful to his health, or could be, and even Steamboat getting the ring at 69, which could be harmful too. Well, the state athletic commissions, they said, no, you can't do it because you're over the age. And I do believe that. Sometimes you got to stop people from themselves. And Flair, because he needs money, or he won't miss a payday, that he wants to go back. And to me, I think it's insulting to the fans. I think you're better off. I think he's better off starting a GoFundMe. I think if he started a GoFundMe, say, give me the money and I won't wrestle again. So I think he would stop from embarrassing himself and embarrassing the fans that went to see him. Seeing Flair in that last match wasn't a good look. Hell, I thought he was going to die at one point. And and I may have said it on this show too, that, he said he didn't remember it because he was passed out, knocked out half the time. I guarantee you he doesn't remember. I don't know how long the match was, 10 minutes maybe. Well, he don't remember maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of it. And the rest of it, he was just cloudy and foggy in the corner or wherever he was. Would you
believe it wasn't even 10? It was something like 28. It went forever, and he doesn't remember half of it.
It went 20 minutes?
Yeah, I think it went over 20 minutes. Yeah, it was very, very slow. There was a lot of not very much action, and then Ric Flair was passed out for quite a few minutes of it.
Well, I didn't know it went 28 minutes, but the fans sitting there watching that, they said, man, they don't want to see him go out like that. It'd have been better if he was in the corner and just went in and, made a big comeback, chop, 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 chop. Everybody hits the floor and he does his strut and everybody's happy. But of course, that wouldn't been his last match. Mm-hmm. I don't know who laid that match out. I guarantee it wasn't Jeff Jarrett. And it had to be Rick. Because he spent too much time, and they should have let the other guy do the selling and Rick do the comeback. Mm-hmm. I don't know where even that philosophy came in.
It was 26-40 officially. I want to also bring up something that Ric Flair said, or reiterate, I should say. What else is there to do? That's what he said. I mean, he cannot think of anything else to do with his life than train to wrestle at 73. Now, obviously, he's his own man. He can make his own choices. He's a big boy. But, I mean, as you said, commissions are there to stop people from themselves. But it's very telling when he says, what else is there to do? And it seems just a bit sort of, I don't know, it's very telling.
That's actually sad. I mean, Ric Flair could do a lot of things. What I think he should do is go help some charities. Go help some people who haven't been as fortunate as he's been. Bring attention to them, like orphan kids or abandoned kids or the homeless or the vets. I mean, we got a bunch of people, and I'm sure you have them in the UK too. We have quite a big, not a big proportion of the population, but a lot of people down on their luck. They don't have a place to live. They don't have enough food. The kids are running wild. So I think if he lent his efforts to helping those people, he could get them a lot of publicity, and he could help them. And I think he's been involved in wrestling, and that's all he's ever known is the wrestling business. But he finds it hard to get out of it. Sometimes I heard a story, an old timer told me a long time ago, and Flair is a prime example of it. He said, "It's not how did you get into wrestling, it's how do you get out of wrestling." Because after you've been, and I'm the same way. After you've been exposed and you've done pro wrestling most of your life, doing something else is actually scary. Because if you have to go make a living, you say, I don't know if I can do this.
I've got a tasteless joke. Why doesn't Ric Flair, his charity could be raising awareness for haemophilia, because he blades so much and bleeds a lot.
And that was another thing he shouldn't have done. That was, because you could look at some of those people, and some of them really were scared he's going to make it out in one piece or alive. But what a great story that would have been. I'm saying, what if he'd have died in that match? Now people tell all their stories, but like I said, I think he has a wish, a hidden wish. That's where he goes.
Why is it so hard to get out of wrestling? Is it just the roar of the crowd? Is it the lifestyle?
Well, a lot of times guys make, just a fortune. And if they have to drop out and go do something else, well, they still make good money, but yet they're not making good money. And when they walk into a room, they don't have the spotlight on them. Boom. And the room darkens down and the music plays and you can walk and you have all these thousands and thousands of adoring fans. Hey, we love you, man. They miss that. I've often said that if they could take that feeling, and every wrestler, well, not every wrestler, I'm sure, but every wrestler has felt like being in the spotlight. It's a great feeling. If they could take that feeling and market it in a drug, it'd be a $1 billion seller, because that feeling cannot be replicated in any other way. You have to, even race car drivers don't get that because they can't hear the crowd because the car is running. But you walk out into an arena with 20,000 or a stadium of 80,000 people, and you hear that mad scream and rush and roar of the crowd. Yeah, it's exhilarating, and it's sometimes I think that's where wrestlers get an exalted sense of really who they are, and sometimes that spills over into the dressing room, and that's when they have problems. But I think they don't want to get out. They don't want to lose the money. And then they don't want to, now they're living another lifestyle.
We will move on. And in fact, we'll move backwards slightly. I was going to ask you, stories of Ricky Steamboat. Did you ever wrestle him?
Yes, I did. I wrestled him. We were both in Georgia. I guess I was about the third year in. Tremendous, tremendous worker. I came back and he said, man, and of course it's wrestling protocol. When you work with a guy, when you finish the match, to go shake his hand, thank you for the match, thank you for not killing you. But Steamboat is like silk. You never feel him. All you got to do is register. And register means sell. Here comes the punch, bam, you're gone. If you register. And we had a match, and I hadn't beaten nobody. But I went out there, and I got a little heat on him. The crowd perked up. And because Steamboat, he's smart, he made it look like, well, hey, this guy's a little tougher than you thought he was. and Dutch has a chance to maybe beat me or has a chance to win. And they got behind it. So remember, in wrestling, it's two guys telling the story. They got to sing the song in tandem, and they got to make a harmony, and they got to, peak it off with a good finish. And then you got a good match. But he was noted for being light as a feather.
What's the difference between a very good wrestler and a great wrestler? And use Ricky Steamboat as the example as a great wrestler.
Well, a great wrestler can do more things or more believable things than say a lot of other wrestlers can do. But not only that gets into an area of where you can't explain it. It's just the connectivity to the crowd. Why, when one guy comes out, the people say, oh, well, okay. But the other guy comes out, he looks better, or it's just the vibe about the guy, that he looks like a star. And that's what Ricky Steamboat had. Now, of course, Ricky Steamboat, they said his father was Sam Steamboat, an old-time favorite in the mid-Atlantic territories in Charlotte and Virginia and the Carolinas. So he already had an edge going in, but he had that look. He was a good-looking guy. The women loved him. The guys liked him. The kids liked him. And he had them from the beginning. So all you had to do was put a dastardly heel like Ric Flair against him. Bam, you got business.
Now, you were going to tell me who it was before we went on air, and I said, don't save it for the podcast. But I thought, aside from Ricky Steamboat and Tito Santana, I interviewed Tito as well, and the connection between these two is that Tito's first name in the wrestling business was Richard Blood, which was Ricky Steamboat's real name. So that's a bit of trivia if you didn't know it. Were there any other major wrestling names that always remained a babyface, never a bad guy?
Oh, Bruno Sammartino. He never turned bad guy. And it would have been a mistake if he had, because he was the top babyface in the old WWF. And if he'd have turned bad guy, that would have wrecked their business. He was over so much, they cried. I mean, he was Italian, and he appealed to, and that's in the Northeast. A lot of Italians, they came and watched him. But if he'd have turned, it was almost like he was turning against the country, and they'd have probably never come back to wrestling again. And you don't have to be a brain scientist to understand. You can't turn the guy to where the people dislike him. You would hurt your own business, and you would hurt him. Another one was Carlos Colon in Puerto Rico. Never turned bad guy, ever, ever, ever. And there's probably been a few more, but some of them, even though they were bad guys, when they turned good guy, they were over like a son of a bitch. People just loved them. And then they'd go back, and some people could do that. Bruno couldn't. I don't think Carlos could, because I think Carlos would have trouble explaining it on the street. Or, on the street in Puerto Rico, everybody, they can just walk right up to you. And for him to explain that, he'd have had trouble doing that.
Without getting knifed.
Well, he wouldn't have got knifed, but, he could probably. But see, some guys don't want to be bad guys. They just don't want to be that. They want to be the good guy that everybody likes. And some bad guys don't want to be good guys. And the best heel that I've seen coming along right now is that guy from AEW at MJF. Mm-hmm. Oh, he's a heat magnet. Oh, you want to slap him. And and to his defense, I don't know him. I've never met him, but I hear he's that way all day long, even on the street. And to be a good heel, like Ric Flair, let's say, he was Ric Flair 24 hours a day. And Randy Savage. Randy Savage was the Macho Man 24 hours a day. When he woke up, oh, yeah. Then he went to breakfast, to the gym, or whatever. He was Macho Man all day long. And Randy Savage apparently died. I mean, when Macho Man was born, Randy Savage kind of died. It was the Macho Man from then on out.
We will move on, and I haven't even got through the first page of this 2.5-page thing, so we will sort of skip a couple. I do apologise, Dutch.
Okay.
Bray Wyatt and the White Rabbit promos. You've seen them. I know you're not the biggest fan of Bray Wyatt, but we're assuming it's Bray Wyatt. But I always like a bit of outside-the-box thinking of how to debut or re-debut someone, and it's a bit of fun.
This is the best way to introduce him. Give him something unusual before he gets there. Promote him. Now, if you say, hey, Bray Wyatt's going to be here next week, and you're thinking, okay, but now all of a sudden this character is going to be here next week, and you're playing the White Rabbit. Who did that song?
Jefferson Airplane. I was humming that today, in fact.
Yeah, it's a great song. And now, they were playing it in the arenas on some of the shows. Now the people are thinking, and I don't know whose idea that was, but it's a brilliant idea. Mm-hmm. Now it intros Bray Wyatt with the whole new slant. And this may be Bray Wyatt's idea himself, because he thinks out of the box. Now, you've heard me say this. It's not the first thing you do in an angle. It's the second thing. So how do they follow this up to keep it at the same heat that it is right now? So we'll see.
I believe Jefferson Airplane turned into Jefferson Starship. And then
they did.
Then just Starship, and then they had a couple of hits, and one of the ones was in Mannequin, the film. Nothing's gonna stop us now. Anyway, I will move on. I will move on. We were going to do Braun Strowman. I'll skip him. Kenny Omega, bite marks on his arm. There's not really much to say about that. We're going to go with War Games, and it makes its main roster WWE debut at this year's Survivor Series. Are there any particular War Games matches that stand out for you, or were you just not really paying attention when you were in WCW at the time?
Well, not really, because a War Game to me is a cluster F, to tell you the truth. They're hard to lay out. They're hard to interest the fans in it. And after a while, they lose their uniqueness if you do it too much. And I think if you try to make War Games like the facade of a pay-per-view, I don't think it'll do that well. You don't have unless maybe you put your hottest angles together and threw them in a cage, but then you're throwing them into one match. What are you going to stock the undercard with? So I never liked the idea of the when it first came out, it was good, but then it was a little more and a little more and a little more. And at some point, the fans just say, hey, that's just too much. And for me, as a fan, I said the same thing, even though it was to my benefit that they do well. But I could see it that the interest wasn't there.
We've seen this in War Games. We've seen this more lately with Elimination Chamber and Money in the Bank and Hell in a Cell. If you have it annually, apart from the Rumble, which is a great idea, but if you have all these cage matches annually, or even more, man, it really seems to work for a couple of years, and then interest just seems to just plummet. And then
well, after they've seen it, they've seen it. What are you going to do? All of a sudden, take it away from them? Just like, hey, like a jury? Say, just disregard the last testimony you had. That didn't happen. But they don't do that. But see, what you got to do, and I think WWE, and I haven't questioned anything that Triple H has done till I saw an article today, and it was the same thing that I was thinking. I was thinking that bringing Braun Strowman back, is, I mean, that didn't excite me at all. He's just the monster of monsters, I guess. The monsters of men, or what is it? What's his name? See, I don't even know his name.
No, I don't even know his name. He's just a big dude. But there's loads of big dudes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I don't know. I don't know. He had a big contract. I don't know if he got the big contract or not. Again, I have no idea. I hope he did. But as a character, he doesn't really stand out to me anymore. But the little song they play for what's the song they play for Bray Wyatt?
Well, the new one, White Rabbit. Yeah.
But this is what the key to wrestling is. You have to tingle or excite the imagination and have the people. Now, when they hear the song, now there's all kind of scenarios going through everybody's head. What is it? What is it? What is it? And when you build up interest like that, you better deliver when he gets there. So it better be more than what the people are thinking, or you missed a massive chance with it. So I'm sure they thought of that, maybe, or maybe not, and we'll see.
We'll go back to War Games. Dusty Rhodes. Which of the concepts of Dusty Rhodes do you remember he came up with that you actually thought was really good? Was it War Games? Was it something, a character, a match?
WrestleCade or Starcade. That's what it was. Starcade. Because that became an annual event, and that was WCW's WrestleMania. That became their WrestleMania.
It was pre-WrestleMania, in fact. So Vince stole from Dusty in a sense.
I don't think so. You think that WrestleMania, when was the first WrestleMania? 83?
First WrestleMania was 85. Starcade, I think, was 83. I'll double check, but I'll promise you.
I think that Dusty left Florida in 84. And then I don't think WrestleCade come to 85.
Here we go. Starcade number 1, 1983. And the first one was a Flair for the Gold, and that was Harley Race versus Ric Flair in the cage, I believe. So that was Ric Flair's second. Was it his second one? His second NWA World Title win.
Anyway, it was sometime in that time period. But Starcade did eventually or end up as the WrestleMania of WCW. And it's a good show. And now they used to have big shows in Charlotte. Sometimes they would do, like on Saturdays and Sundays, they would do double headers. They would do Charlotte at 3:00 on Saturday afternoon. And everybody that was on early ran to the car and hopped in. Then they would go somewhere to Greensboro. And they'd have the big show. Then somewhere on Sunday, it'd be Greenville, South Carolina. Then they'd hop in the car and they'd go to Asheville. They would do 2 WrestleCades in 2 different towns with basically the same card. So those guys, a lot of people don't know that, people in WWE talking about how much they travel and how much they work. Guys, when I started, worked 300 days a year, at least 300 days a year. And some of those days were double header days. So, and some of those old timers, that's why they paced themselves, because hell, they was working the hell out of them. You made pretty good money, but I think the most I worked in 1 week, I was in Continental in Alabama, and they had it was like a tournament every night for 7 nights. And I wrestled 3 times every night. I wrestled 21 times that week because it was the same lineup every town. And it was 3 matches every, and maybe a TV appearance in there too. So it could have been 22. That's a lot of getting in the ring, buddy. I should have been paid. I should have been paid by the hour.
Shame they didn't pay for your trans.
No, they never paid that.
Yeah. There's one more thing about the news. I'm going to have to skip a couple of things for time's sake, but this I thought was very much worth mentioning, and it's Kurt Angle revealing on his podcast that he is dealing with memory issues. I'll give you the quote. I would say I probably had 4 concussions that I know of, major ones. One was a slight concussion that wasn't too bad. The other 3 were pretty bad. But even to this day, I'm starting to not remember things. I'm only in my early 50s, but I've gotten a little damage to my brain. There's no doubt about it. My memory is not that great anymore. I really have to think hard about remembering the past. And that's pretty terrifying. I know this isn't. It's sort of the same thing. I saw ESPN 30 for 30 about the Chicago Bears, and it was Jim McMahon. He was the quarterback at the time, and he was talking about how it wasn't so much the head trauma, or it was the head trauma, but it was the neck trauma that came along with it as well that ended up sort of reducing blood flow to his brain and that kind of thing, and early onset dementia with just head blows. But yeah, your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not doubting what Kurt said at all. And when you get those concussions, because when you step in that ring, and I was thinking, how many times have I been hit in the head, even by a working punch? You know, if you took your finger and just thumped yourself on the head 50 times a day or whatever, after a while, it would cause some damage. Not counting the suplex you take and all this other stuff that snaps your neck, because it's a problem. And Kurt was in so much pain at one time, because I was with him in TNA. He told me that when he woke up in the morning, now some people will find this hard to believe, and I found it hard to believe too. And then people that have gone through it too, they said, no, that's not hard to believe. He told me he took 10 Percocets to start the day. 10. Now, if I took 10, you'd have to call the hospital for me. I'd be all over the place. But he said that was 10 just to get going for the day. And no telling how many else he took. So, of course, he developed an addiction that I think he had to have treatment for. But what he's saying here is, it's brain trauma, head trauma, getting knocked out in football and wrestling. It does have its drawbacks, and and sometimes I have trouble remembering. I have trouble remembering things on this show sometimes. Remember when I'm going, hey, what's the guy's name? You know, I just forgot a while ago. We were just talking about it, but I don't know if that's from taking the shots in the head or whatever. But I think most old time wrestlers do have a little bit of memory problems.
They've even tried to stop in training, whatever, in football, our football, heading the ball, because even though it's relatively low impact, you do it so many times that they all end up being sort of like micro traumas or micro concussions almost. And a lot of footballers are developing dementia or memory problems compared to people who, compared to the masses in general. So even small knocks can accumulate over time.
Well, that's why they came out with a targeting rule in pro football, NFL. And the targeting is you're leading with your head onto a runner. And they're saying the runner is kind of defenseless. If he's been hit, he stopped, and you come in and hit him. And you can be actually ejected from the game, and you miss the first half of the next game. They are trying to stop that head trauma. And there's a lot of guys in NFL football. You can't even talk to him. Mike Tyson says he just loses complete control of what he's saying sometimes. Said he's been hit so many times. Muhammad Ali, I read the other day, he's been hit in the head 100,000 times. And that's only in 30 fights, or maybe 40 fights. Well, it's not counting his amateur background.
Or sparring, of course.
Yeah, and you get tagged in that too. I don't know how guys can do that. But my best wishes go out to anybody who has brain damage from football, from wrestling, from boxing, anything.
Just one more mention of Kurt is when you were in TNA, I don't know if you ever went up to him or anybody else went up to him and just said, slow down, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do whatever you're planning, some whatever crazy move that it may endanger his health. And he probably did endanger his health on quite a lot of them as well.
Well, you couldn't tell Kurt not to do it. You could tell him, but unless the boss of the company told him, and he wouldn't even listen to that. Dixie Carter was the owner, and Jeff Jarrett was the co-owner. They could go up to him and tell him, don't do this. And he didn't listen to them because he actually thought of himself as above them. He was Kurt Angle. He'd been in WWF, WWE. Now he's down in TNA. And you want to know how I knew that Kurt's drug addiction was really severe. When they released him cleanly. They didn't have no 90-day no compete clause or nothing.
This is they being WWE.
WWE, they released him when they said you can go, he could go and work for whoever that day. And they said you're gone. One reason I heard they were afraid he was going to die while he was on WWE payroll. Of course, I heard that. I don't know if it's true, but they don't need that negative publicity after, the drug scandals they've had before. And I think this was when Vince was trying to sign some new TV deals, and he didn't need that negative publicity. But I did hear they wanted to get rid of him as fast as they could because they knew he had a severe problem, and they was afraid he's either going to die, he was going to overdose, or some bad news could come out of his drug use.
I've had probably about 4 or 5 concussions. Nothing as major as this, but I'm presuming you've had far worse than I've had as well. What was the worst? You used to call it getting your bell rung, but what were the symptoms of your worst head injury?
Well, I'm kind of lucky. I've been knocked out. I've been knocked out by a punch on the street. Been knocked out by football. A guy, he targeted me right in the head. Out I went. But usually, I got knocked out one time in Savannah, Georgia, and I was working with this guy, and our heads collided. He took a step in. We both throwing a punch. Instead of our punches colliding, our heads collided. Bam! We both went down. We knocked each other out. And when I came back, I did not know where I was. I was just in a well-lit spot with a bright light over top of me. I didn't know I was in a wrestling match. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what I was doing. And I went back in time to when I was about 7 years old, and I was walking over a little, this is crazy. I was walking over a little trail to my grandmother's house, and I could feel this, and it was like early June. I could actually, and I could hear the birds chirping in the tree line and the bugs flying around, and I could feel the sun on my arms. Crazy, huh? Mm. But I felt all that, and then come to, and I said, well, I'll be damned. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, in the middle of a ring in a wrestling match. Then I realized, but it's hard to tell how long you're out. What might be a second to me could be 30 seconds, or what seemed like 30 seconds could only be 2. But that's probably the worst experience I've ever had being knocked out.
Yeah, it's amazing the coping mechanisms that the brain comes up with to sort of soften the blow, or sort of like bring you back out of it. 2 things that we are going to get to that aren't news, but these are questions that were sent to you. By the way, if you want to send questions into the show, it's questionsfordutch@gmail.com. But you had a couple of questions that you wanted to answer, and the first one was, years ago, wrestlers, in order to make their bookings, had to drive their own vehicles to the events or ride with other talent. And number 1, in your opinion, how many miles have you driven or travelled over the lifetime of your career? And how many run-ins with highway patrol? And were any of them serious?
I estimated one time how many miles that I traveled in a year. And years ago, we'd wrestle 7 days a week. Sometimes those trips were like 200 miles one way, so that's 400 miles in a day. Others were like 250. And I'm going to estimate here, but I think I have probably traveled close to 2 million miles. And this is when we're just in cars. If it was 100,000 miles a year, which was easy to do, that would have been almost 2 million right there. I think maybe more. And that's not counting the plane rides I've taken. But I didn't take plane rides, so I got until later on with WWE, WWF. We never flew back in the territorial days. We always drove.
Did you not fly in Florida, though? I thought Eddie Graham had a plane at one point.
Well, I did there. Eddie Graham had one. I flew with him, but he would only fly to Miami, the long ones. And that's how I went to really know Eddie. Smart man. You would have liked him. And Ernie Ladd, he would pay for a pay for a plane, and he'd take me because he liked me, and he wouldn't charge me nothing. And you know what the plane cost to fly to Miami?
No.
Like $50. $50, maybe 75. But he would pay that just so he could talk to me. I love Dirty. But talking about having trouble with the highway patrol, yeah, after driving so many miles, yeah, you become visible to the highway patrol. So one night I'm riding with Undertaker before he was Undertaker. I think he was Mark Calloway then. We were coming back from Louisville, and there's a cop pulled in behind me, and Mark saw him, and Mark was driving, and he looked in his mirror and he said, "There's a cop behind him." I said, "Don't worry about him. We're almost to the Tennessee line, and he'll have to go back. He'll have to turn around." We were actually at the last exit where he should have got off. But right before we got the exit, here comes the blue light on. Pulled us over. And then now the flashlight, the searchlight came on strong. Then we heard the trooper's voice over the loudspeaker. "Driver of the vehicle, turn your car off, take your keys, drop them on the pavement." And then he says, exit your vehicle facing the front of your car with your hands in the air. I said, "What the hell is this? This is serious." And then I heard other sirens coming. Wow, wow. One's off this side, one's off the other side. So he got him back there, searched him, took him to the back of the car. I think he handcuffed him. I'm not sure. Then I was in the front seat, and we had a guy called Action Jackson, a big old kid out of Dallas. He was in the back, he weighed about 300 pounds. So they told me, "Passenger in the front seat, exit your vehicle facing the front with your hands in the air and, back up." So I got out with my hands in the air and backed up. Guy come on and put me down on the hood, searched me. Of course, they searched Mark too, handcuffed me, my hands behind my back. So what the hell? Now I heard, and I got to throw this up. We all had do-rags on. You know what do-rags are? Well, we all had do-rags. So we looked like gang members, I guess. So we kept hearing these sirens coming. I went, "What the hell? Something's bad. Somebody had to get robbed or something. Somebody got shot or whatever." And I bet by the time, in 5 minutes, they were like 5 police vehicles there. 2 state patrol, 2 county, and 1 city. We was right outside Franklin, Kentucky. So they got Action Jackson out, and he's a black guy with a do-rag on. And one guy pulled in. He came up the on ramp, the off ramp. He come up the off ramp and parked into grass. And then he got out. Then I heard this. It was a shotgun. He was chambering around. I went, "What the hell?" So they come back, and I said, "What's it? Shut up." They wouldn't let me say nothing. They said, "Search." And so, now the rookies came, and he said, "Search the car." So they started searching the car, searched all the way through it, the trunk and everything. Finally, the kid looked up, and he was a deputy, said, "Boss, I don't see nothing." He said, "Search it again." Well, they searched it. And to our benefit, there was not even a beer in the car. There wasn't a joint in the car. There were no pills in the car. The only thing they found, because I dipped, tobacco, all they found was a spit cup. That's all they found. So finally, I'm trying to talk to the guy, and I said, "Sir, my name is Dutch Mantell." And he said, "Shut the fuck up. We know who you are." I went, "Oh, not pretty much on chit chat, are you?" So he didn't find nothing. So they came back, and I said, "Well, why did you stop us?" He said they had a report from a truck driver that a car fitting the description of the car we were in, and 3 guys that fit our description, and we had the dome light on too. And that's how he could identify us. They said we were going down the road, and we had a gun, and we were brandishing That's the only time I've ever been associated with the term brandishing. We were brandishing a gun at the other motorist. So they pulled us over. And that's what they were looking for. They were looking for a gun, and we didn't have one. So he said, "You're free to go." I said, "Okay." And they said, "We need to ask you something." They knew who we were. They said, "Can we get some autographs?" I swear to God, "Can we get some autographs?" And then somebody asked me, they said, "Did you give him an autograph?" I said, "Hell yeah, I'll give him an autograph. just let me go. Here you go. What's your wife's name? What's your kid's name?" We were gone. But when he pulled us out, I forgot to bring this up. The guy had his gun out, his 357 or what, 9mm. He had it pointed at Mark when he got out. Then when I got out, he had it on me. And, they kind of get on their knees and brace. And because I could see him from, even though the spotlight was in my face, I could see him right there. So that was a scary, scary moment right there.
Did you? I interviewed Barry Windham not too long ago. Did you get ever into the thing of shooting road signs while you were driving?
No, David Schultz did, though. Dr. D, David Schultz, he was the one that slapped, what's his name, the guy in New York?
John Stossel.
He slapped the hell out of him. He would do that. And he would ride down roads, and he said, "Hey, Dutch." He's legitimate. I love him to death, but he's legitimately nuts. He said, "What's this, man?" Boom, boom. And he had one of the biggest guns and loud. And then he would shoot sides on the other side. Like he'd aim over because he wouldn't hit them. He wouldn't hit those too much. And he didn't mind pulling that gun either. David was a tough guy, and he had a tough life. And, he got out of wrestling, got in the bounty hunting business. So if they was going to make they got the Dwayne, the bounty hunter or whatever, they needed to make this on David Schultz. He was the one they would have had a hell of a program with.
Well, they actually did. I think like a Japanese TV company actually did like a pilot or something like that back in the 90s. And that shows up on the Dark Side of the Ring with Dr. D.
With David,
yeah,
they may have. Yeah. They may have.
It's definitely worth to watch that one. Just because I mentioned Dr. D, you said he wasn't afraid of pulling a gun. I'm presuming that's on fans, or was this on other wrestlers?
No, just people on the road. If people mess with him, cut him off or something, he'd pull up and he'd show them the gun. It's a damn wonder we didn't make it by being locked up in 22 different counties. I mean. But see, David was an imposing guy. He was like 6'4". He's about 260, and he looked crazy. He had that curly hair, and he'd get out and the way he talked. And a lot of times that's good for a defense, but I think even tough guys back down from David. And he didn't mind the fight either, because he never punched people. He told me that. He'd slap them. He said a slap is much better than a punch, because a punch he said, you put a slap up somebody's head, it spreads it out. And I've been slapped a few times. Yeah, he was right.
And just very quickly, were you in favor of him slapping John Stossel?
Well, no, I don't think Vince was in favor of it either. I think, and he got sued, or Vince got sued. I think it cost him $400,000, or the insurance company $400,000. I think Vince told him, like, "Hey, take care of this guy," or something. I think he wanted David just to orally beat him up, verbally beat him up, not really hit him. And first time I saw that, I went, "What the heck?" And then I knew right then David hasn't changed at all.
We will get to the second question you wanted me to ask, and then I will thank you for your time, and we will shut the podcast down. But it is the craziest / oddest places you've ever wrestled. Do you want me to read the list, or you can remember the list? I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember the list. I'd have to think about it.
Okay.
Read the list.
Okay, NASCAR racetracks, big truck, exhibitions, state fairs, county fairs, prisons twice, sleaze bars, churches, high and junior high gyms, National Guard armories, a barge in Miami in Biscayne Bay, porno theaters, in front of a percussion orchestra in a performing arts centre, rodeos at a soccer stadium in Trinidad, auto sales lots, Madison Square Garden, and NFL stadiums. Now, porno theatres.
Yep. It was just a theater that's years and years ago. It was, I think, about to shut down. It wasn't very big, and they threw a ring up there on the stage. And nothing was playing when we were there, but that's what the theater was used for.
Sticky floors.
And it was, oh my God, it was a horrible part of town. I couldn't wait to get out of there. And we had, it was just really sleaze all the way through. I don't know who booked me there. The other thing we got booked in, not only once, but twice, was 2 prisons. One was a federal, Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in Atlanta, and they put it out on the baseball field. And, like prisoners don't have nothing else to do, I guess. So I guess they just come out there and watch what we were doing. But I looked up, and it was baseball stands. And there was this one guy sitting up there all by himself, and he's reading the book or he's reading the paper or something. Nobody was around him. Nobody. He had the whole corner of the top grandstand up there. And I asked one of them, and you don't have guards with you, you have trustees. The guards are up in the towers. I'm thinking, well, hey, if these prisoners want to riot, they just got us. These trustees not going to fight them. They got to live with them. So, but I asked who that guy was, and they said he was one of the top members of the Miami Mafia. I think his name was Trafficante. If you look the name up, he was a big deal. And of course, I didn't know who they were talking about, but I knew that him sitting up there by himself, people left him alone. Then the other one we had to make was a maximum security prison in Kentucky. I've had a lot of shit happen to me in Kentucky. Stopped by cops, going back to a prison. Man, you walk in, you smell the disinfectant because there's so many people there, and they search your bag, and then they put you on a conveyor belt, and you walk literally 12 feet, 15 feet, and they open the door and close it back. They search your bag again. They just searched it twice. Now they're going to search it again. Now it was going to where we had to go, and we were going to like a little basketball indoor gymnasium, and nobody was there till like 2:00. So when they rung the bell, here they come. And the place filled up. Now, keep in mind, I've never been in jail. I've never been in prison. So all this was new to me. So I look out there. You talk about segregated. That prison was, you see the Aryan Nation, the white gang over here. Then you see the black gang in the opposite corner over there. Then you see the Hispanic gang over here. And then you see the bad guys, the really bad guys, they're all huddled up. Then you see all the gay guys that are over there out of the way. And I'm looking out there, and I see this guy, he's about 6'9", and long hair, and had sunglasses on. For what, I don't know. We were inside, and it was cold that day. So I asked one of the trustees there, I said, hey, and I would point a guy, what's he in here for? Oh, he's in here for armed robbery. What's he in here for? Oh, he stole a car. He robbed a bank or whatever. But I saw this guy. I said, what's he in here for? He said, ooh, boy. They said one day he was a motorcyclist. He was a motorcycle gang guy. And his bike broke down, and a guy picked him up. And there was a bike dealer, a parts place in town. So they called the guy up and got him to open it up. It's like 10:00 at night. And he got his part. And then he shot the guy in the store, then shot the guy driving the car. So then he went out there and got back in the car, drove it, fixed his bike, and then drove off, and then went somewhere else and killed 3 or 4 more other people. So he killed about 6 people in a period of 2 or 3 hours. And he says that nobody even talks to him in the prison because his reputation is that bad. And I said, well, don't introduce me to him because I don't know him. But the wildest thing about that is the heels are the baby faces. And the baby faces are the heels. They hate the good guys, but they love the heels.
Just like Canada.
Well, I guess, but if I'd have went out there and I was wrestling the Fantastics, they were used to being cheered. They were booing the shit out of them, and they were all my fans. They said, kick his ass, Dutch. They said, throw him out here. We know what to do with him. And he was getting mad. So I put a stretch on him, and I reached down, I was grabbing the rope, but then I'd reach down and I'd pull his trunks up. Oh my God, they went nuts. I mean, that was just the sight of them, I guess. I don't know. And I said, now, Tommy kept saying, I'm leaving. I said, well, leave. I don't give a shit. If you want to leave, go back to the dressing room. Then I said, you better have that trustee going with you. They may snatch your ass. But anyway, we spent about 3 hours there that day, which was 2 hours and 55 minutes more than I want to spend. And then we got back in the car and we left. I said, I never want to go back. And I went back to the owner I was in Memphis. It was Jerry Jarrett. And I said, thank you very much for booking me in a hellhole that I never want to go back to. No, he thought it was kind of funny, but it was a good experience. Not a bad one, but I don't want to do it again.
What was the payoff?
Well, that one, I know it wasn't bad. It's about $500.
No, that's not too bad.
That's not too bad. And it was a double shot. Then I would go to Louisville. And so I picked up, I made about $750, $800 that day.
Not bad.
That was when the business was good though.
I've got to pick up a couple more here. So you mentioned like state fairs, county fairs, National Guard armories, that kind of thing. A few that I want to just make mention of. A NASCAR racetrack. Now, some of these you can house like 200,000 people in. I mean, did they have to have
not that big? No, it was like NASCAR race there. They helped sponsor the track. They wasn't their track, but they had NASCAR drivers there. But this is what they did. They put me, a ring on the back of an 18-wheeler, just the frame. And they would put the driver in there and we'd get in, they'd introduce us. And what we had to do, we started wrestling. And we would go all the way around the track, first turn, go down the back stretch, and then come around to the final turn. And then wouldn't you know it, that the match would end right when we got right back in front of the middle of the stands. I wrestled Dirty White Boy, and we got on the back stretch, and he was beating the shit out of me because they had beer in the dressing room. Well, he was about drunk. He was beating the shit out of me. I said, God damn, loosen up. You're killing me. He said, it's good for the business. I said, shit. I said, the only one that knows you're doing it is me. They're too far away to see, so stop it. So we got back around, and this is also where I did this twice, but they had a race. They wanted the wrestlers to race each other. And they asked me, do you want to drive a car? I said, hell no. I didn't even drive up here. I'm damn sure not going to drive around the track. But I said, he will. And that was Undertaker. He was Mark. And Mark said, yeah, I'll drive. So when they took us out on the track, he was going to race Kerry Von Erich. So, and I asked the guy, I said, which one of these cars, and they had two cars that they picked. Which one of these is the fastest? He said, tell him to get in a black car. I said, okay. And then Mark came. I said, Mark, he said, the black car is stronger. He said, okay. So, boy, when they give him time to go, that Undertaker, he showered down on it. But he got to that second turn and he spun around. And then he was beating Kerry at that time. Kerry hit him in the back with the car, not really hard. Then went up there. He got out of his car, pulled Undertaker out, slammed him, got back in his car and beat and won the race. I said, damn, I've never seen that finish before. But I said, it was pretty good. Whose idea was that? He said, hell, it was Kerry. I said, okay.
Just two more that I'll pull up. Performing in front of a percussion orchestra. So what, were they playing the music while you were wrestling?
Well, it's percussion is drums. They had a drill about anything that's made a percussion. it was drums and, they beat logs, and that's on YouTube, by the way. And I wrestled Jeff Jarrett. You can go to YouTube and look it up.
Mm.
And that was the match they put in the Smithsonian Institute as a part of the some Tales of the Prairie or something. But it's a permanent fixture in the Smithsonian Institute. And I think that me and Sir Jeffrey were the only wrestlers in the Smithsonian Institute, unless they put Hagan or somebody else in there.
Now, you've claimed you've been in the Smithsonian Institute in 1971 after you wrestled like 6 matches, didn't you? One was a bear, one was a woman.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you actually meant it then, but you actually are.
No, I am. You can look at you. And I tell you what I do. Next time we do this, I will bring the official letter.
I tell you what, we can even, if we can find the match, we'll watch it and comment on it. And the last one, barge in Biscayne Bay.
Well, I've told that story that they have trouble with a building or something, athletic commission. So they said, okay, we'll just go around it. And somebody had an idea. Hey, you could put a ring on that barge out there, push it out a little bit. So you're off land. Therefore, you're not under their jurisdiction, and you can have your matches. And we can put 500 fans on it or whatever. And that's what they did. Then I ended up going into the bay. Hey, I've wrestled some crazy places, really.
We used to have that here as well. We used to have pirate radio because legitimately you couldn't get a license unless you were like the BBC or something. And then they just put them on a boat, just leave them in the dock, and then the DJ. That's why it always used to be DJ Overboard for many, many years when it was pirate radio.
Did they sell advertisements?
Yeah, they're all commercial.
Okay.
And I think with that, there was one other thing I wrote here, but we'll leave this for another time. I've just written down, how dumb were you? But we'll leave that for another. We'll leave that for another show. But for now,
listen. When you hear this story, how dumb I was, you say, "Oh my God, how do you ever get in?" It embarrasses me now to tell it. I'll tell it next show.
There we go. Next show then. What a teaser, how dumb Dutch was at one point in his life. But for now, we'll do the plugs. So there we go. Tales from a Dirt Road, available on Amazon, unsigned. And The World According to Dutch. Oh, take it easy. The microphone's attacking you. Also available on Amazon. And, my books as well. But certificates and signed books, where can everybody get them?
Dirty Dutch Mantell with 2 L's at gmail.com. It's $40. You got to pay by PayPal. Just send me $40 at Dirty Dutch Mantell at Gmail. Leave your name and address, and it'll be on its way.
There you go then. For now, thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you next week, and thank you, Dutch, for entertaining us once again. Go Clemson.
Go Clemson. Yeah. National champions. I wish.
We the people.
We the people.